Good evening, my name is Paul Schiernecker, and tonight I'm going to be reading Inside Her by Lucia Jordan. His lips were warm when he took her mouth in a slow, playful kiss, but they demanded nothing. It was a bare brush of lips, designed to tease, to tantalize. It made Cleo burn. She kissed him harder, angling her mouth to taste him, as she slid her hands up his chest. His mouth tasted like caramel and cinnamon, and it made her even hungrier for him. When Tony cupped his hand under her head and pressed his tongue to her lips, she opened her mouth and took it deep inside her. She loved how he trembled when she started going down on his tongue. Groaning, Tony yanked her onto his lap, holding her tight against his body as he rained hungry kisses down her throat. The rasp of stubble tickled and raised goosebumps all over her body, but her body arched to his kisses, craving more. Cleo reached her arms around his neck and arched closer, running her fingers through his hair, teasing his neck with her fingertips. Her skirt slid up, and she wriggled, angling her hips as she could feel the thick, hard ridge of him through his jeans. She gasped at the heat of him, rocking harder and losing control, crying out as he rubbed his bulge against her silk-covered sex, teasing them both. He ground his shaft against her clit, through their clothes, circling his body, making her breath hitch. She arched and writhed, begging for closer contact. "Not here," he growled. "Not like this." Tony hauled her up into his arms and walked to the bedroom. Winding her arms around his neck, she covered his mouth with hers, suckling on his tongue as he carried her to bed. He tossed his glasses on the nightstand and went to town on her neck again, rubbing his stubble against her throat and biting and licking the soft skin there. Slipping his hand inside her blouse, he cupped her breast and flicked his finger across her nipple through the thin fabric of her bra. Cleo's hips jerked as her clit pulsed in response, and she cried out sharply, "Please, more!" Sliding her blouse up, he took her nipple into his mouth through the silk and sucked on it, hard. She let out a throaty cry and arched back, fingers grasping at the mattress on the verge of climax. She was drenched, her clit throbbing, and the lips of her sex were swollen and aching. Then he stepped back and stripped for her, whimpering. She bit her lip and watched as he kicked off his sandals, unbuttoned his shirt, tossing it to the floor. His chest was magnificent, and she licked her lips at the soft trail of golden hair disappearing into the waistband of his jeans. She glanced up and saw the primitive heat in his gaze, the hot, direct sexuality of his smile. He was teasing her for both their pleasures, and she couldn't stop watching. With her eyes still locked on his, Cleo wriggled out of her skirt and slid her fingers inside her panties. Her hips snapped as her fingers caressed her swollen, aching clit, her body on fire, responding to his body and eyes. Tony bit off a curse as she played with herself, his fingers curling into fists, his hips jerking forward as her body arched off the bed. His fingers went to his jeans next, popping each button until he tugged them down and kicked them off. The thick knot of cock in his boxers made her mouth water. It was enormous and twitching, and she couldn't resist. She yanked the boxers down and took him into her mouth in one long, slow suck, sliding her hands behind him to cup his ass, pulling him closer. "God!" he screamed, hips rocking. "Cleo!" She locked on hard, tasting the tangy salt of him, and taking in his sharp male scent as she softly raked her nails down the sides of his hips. Pulling back, she took his shaft in her hands and flicked the tip of him hard with her tongue. He was slick and salty sweet as she dragged her tongue down the length of him, feeling the veins in his cock pulse against her tongue. His cock twitched with every flick, and her body responded to his reaction, her clit and nipples on fire while she teased him. He leaned back, his thighs shaking with the effort to stay in control, as she fluttered her tongue around the throbbing head of his cock, tasting the fluid purling there. He growled, pulled out of her mouth before dropping onto his knees in front of her. Ripping off her panties, he slid his palms under her ass, lifted her to his mouth, and sucked her tight, aching clit into his mouth. She cried out, the intensity of the pleasure shooting through her body. "Please!" she begged. Clawing at the sheets, she dug her heels into the mattress, lifting her hips to his mouth. He sucked harder, pulling her clit deeper, flicking it hard with his tongue. Then he peeled her open with his fingers and stabbed his tongue deep inside. He alternated the actions, sucking her clit and tonguing her while she arched off the bed. "Please!" Oh wait, that was her. "Please!" she screamed. "Come for me," he gasped against her sex. He circles his thumb around her swollen clit, then went back to it with his mouth, sucking and licking and tugging. Cleo screamed his name, her hips bucking as she climaxed violently. "Beautiful," he murmured, kissing up her body as he ran his fingers in slow, sensual circles up her sides. "You're so beautiful."